to my commentary channel, Nick loading in. I am sorry for any of you who do care on the delay of part 2. Still working on it, but in the wake of these media outlets coming out with new information regarding Pam and essentially her culpability in all of this, at least legally, just some kind of disheartening things in my opinion. But before we get into this, everything in this video is 100% my speculation and opinion. I do encourage everybody go do their own research and formulate their own opinions, and please, as always, do so respectfully. So here's the deal with Pam. For those of you who haven't seen it yet or don't know, KUTV2 News, Brian Schnee and Law and Crime Sidebar got together and did a segment on Pam Bodtcher and some information pertaining to her. Brian did interview a detective that had been working on the case who said that at first they did look at Pam as a suspect, but she ultimately says as they went through their investigation, they screened a phone call that Ruby and Pam had after the arrest while Ruby was in jail. They also apparently looked through phone communications, obviously the journals, and they were unable to find anything of substantial value that even put Pam in that house in Ivins at Jody's home within those 6 months that we know that the abuse was occurring and escalating. In addition to that, Ruby in her court statement addresses Pam and her husband Roy by saying, "And to my dear friends Pam and Roy, I apologize that now, because of your affiliation with me, your innocence will now be called into question." And she does place it directly on her affiliation with her, which I thought was interesting because I know Pam and Jody have had friendships and everything that dates before Ruby. So I would assume that their affiliation with Jody is probably a little bit more damning. But despite all this, I just really don't believe that Pam had absolutely zero idea that anything was going on with these children. And if the pen papers are real, and if Kevin's statement and everything in it is real, then Pam at the very minimum supported this shit in some way, shape, or form. So let me share why I think this and why I feel like even if she doesn't get a legal trial, I want to know how she fares within the public opinion at this point, the court of public opinion, right? Trial by media. So first, let's go back to pretty much the beginning, the body cam footage.
How did you start to know the family? How did you guys meet?
The Frankie family?
Yeah.
Through a program called Connections.
Okay.
It's a kind of a life skills
Yeah.
type thing.
Okay. So tell me more about like when you first met them through the program, or not really know what the program is.
She was a coach.
She was okay. What type of things do they do with the program?
It's like life skills,
Life skills.
like learning how to, it's like be honest, responsible, and humble. Those are those 3 pillars of their program.
Okay. Is there like a meeting place where you guys met, or is it kind of a virtual
No.
place?
It's online every Saturday morning. It's called Empowering Joy.
Okay. How long have you known them for?
Oh, geez.
Ish.
Probably, I don't know. Let's see. I mean, I didn't know her really well because she was in the program, but I didn't really know her. But I've known her probably really well, maybe 3 years.
Okay. Is this like a program that she started, or is it just one that she kind of...
She's just a part of it.
She's just part of it.
Pam acts so stupid when it comes to being asked about connections, and I know everybody's really honed in on that. It's just knowing everything, and as things have kind of become clearer, that interaction has always bothered me. I mean, for Pam to say that she really doesn't, or for Pam to not be able to explain connections clearly and concisely, considering she's all over Connections, all over the Connections Facebook page. She was listed as the president of the nonprofit on the Connections website when it was still up. I mean, there's several pictures of her involved with things on the Facebook, specifically from conferences to seminars to trips. And then she's even in a video where all the mental fitness trainers were getting together and be like in training or being trained, and she's a part of that as well.
In Utah at there we are. Hi, we are live in Mapleton, Utah at a home of somebody who is learning how to be a mental fitness trainer, and we have Ruby here, and Ruby is a part of the original 10 women that are being trained to become mental fitness trainers. Yeah, coming to a town near you. And here's Kim and Jess, Becky, Liz, Michelle, and then she's got Johnny. And Johnny. And Johnny. And there's Pam. Did you get Pam? No, Pam's over here. No. I love taking the parenting class. My daughter was going to take the class and asked me if I would take it with her. And I thought, well, I'm pretty much done parenting. My kids are all raised, and she really encouraged me to take it with her. And I am so grateful that I did, because I learned the principles that she was going to be teaching in her home, so I could reinforce them when I was around my grandchildren. And it's been really a great experience.
So to me, that was only in Pam's best interest to put some distance between her and that program. But why lie about it? Why, when there's so much evidence that shows the contrary? But I think the biggest thing for me is actually what is in Ruby's journals. So let's go through that really quick. July 15th, 2023, Ruby writes down how she is so glad that Pam had volunteered to take Ruby's other middle girls, who would be 16 at the time. Pam volunteers to take A to her ACT test. That is an American fork. There's a couple things that I thought when I read that. One is, if Pam has to take A to the test in American fork, which is specifically noted, does that mean that A is staying all alone in that home in Springville? And for how long has she been alone? We know that 2 days prior, on the 13th, this idea of moving and getting land is formed, and Ruby writes that Jay, the other middle daughter, who is 14, and Jody are going to be going on a road trip to look at land. And then on the 14th, Ruby writes that Jay and Jody are out looking for RV trailers. So again, that means presumably A is actually all alone. Nobody else in the house, because we know Chad and Sherry aren't around. Kevin at this point is non-existent in the kids' life. And Ruby is down in Ivan's with Jay, R, and E. So at the very least, Pam would have had known that they weren't around. And to me, I don't know, I would just, why would your one child be in Springville, 16 years old, all by herself? You've got all the three other children down south. Like, why? The only thing I can assume is that A technically had a job that's talked about, and that was obviously in Springville. But either way, if you're leaving a 16-year-old for an extended period of time, without any oversight, alone in a home, overnight, for multiple nights, I don't know, I just feel like that's not okay for a long period of time, first of all. And second of all, if Pam was privy to any of this, she didn't question any of it? I mean, I would be asking questions. Especially considering that Ivans is not close. It's a 3.5-hour drive one way at minimum. Average a little bit of traffic, you're probably looking at a 4.5 hour drive that one way. So you're looking at a 7 to 9 hour day if you drive there and back. So if you've got multiple days leading up to this, there's no way that Ruby is able to drive to Springville and check on A and do all of that while she's prescribing the type of torture that she documents in her journals. Now, of course, there is the possibility that A is literally staying with Pam, but then why would she have to pick up A and take her to the ACT test? She would already, unless she picked her up the night before and had her stay with her or whatnot, but that's not documented. It just says that she's taking her to the test on the 15th at some time. And I don't think that these girls were staying with Pam on the regular, because even in the body cam footage, she states when the police asked like what she was going to do with the kids later, oh, I was just going to take them home. Very nonchalant too, knowing that Ruby's still in Ivans, not knowing if she's going to be back home. There is like, I mean, that's just the automatic assumption. I'm just going to take them home. Anyways, I would love to hear what anybody else's thoughts is on this. Now, something I do want to mention, and it's kind of a little bit of a side note, but how many times Jay appears in the journal? Again, I assume A isn't listed as much because she has a job back in Springville. Again, that's just my speculation. But nonetheless, Ruby's journals places both girls at the home in Ivans a couple different times, but primarily Jay. Also, during the wee hours of July 15th, the reason why Ruby mentions that she is so thankful that Pam volunteered to take A to the ACT test is because R tries to escape unsuccessfully. Ruby realizes this at sometime early in the morning, like 2-something a.m., and raises the alarm. She says that her and Jay scour the house, and when they realize that they can't find R in the house, Jody and Jay go get in Jody's car and take off to look for her little brother on the streets. Ruby also takes off in her car. Ultimately, Ruby ends up finding R. What Ruby says is that she gets them home, they sleep for a little bit, and then around 8 a.m., Ruby, R, E, and J leave the home so that Jody could show it to somebody, because she's obviously trying to sell it at this point. And then around 8:30 a.m., they meet back up with Jody at a gas station where Ruby lets Jody take E and J with her to Tucson to go look at property. And then Ruby takes R back to the house. So again, Jay has to know some of what's going on at this point, right? So let me fast forward to July 24th or 25th maybe. And I say that because I'm not sure on these entries. They're a little weird to me. And honestly, the one on July 25th looks like somebody else completely wrote it. I feel like it was confused for Ruby's. But if you look at it, see, the first is Ruby's. And it looks like Ruby's handwriting and talks about making the kids work at the cemetery. But then the entry for the 25th, the writing looks different. The Y's, the G's, they just look different to me. And Ruby is referred to as in third person for only the second time in all of these entries does that occur. Which the first entry is a little interesting, but the second one, it's just clear to me it's somebody else writing. And then furthermore, if you get towards the end of the entry on the 25th, whoever put that entry in, which I'm going to speculate and assume that's probably Jody, but they never refer to the kids by their names, which Ruby is pretty consistent in doing all the way through the journal, referring to her kids as R and E. but not in this one. This one, it just refers to them as the kids. And at the very end, it's listed that it says, I told the kids I'm helping them, and they mock and reject my help. God sent me to help them repent, and they turned me away. So again, God sent me. I swear that it's Jody and not Ruby. But definitely let me know what you think on that as well below. Anyways, somewhere between these 2 days, R, E, and J are taken out to that cemetery where we do see potentially footage, I think probably from the lady that ends up supposedly harassing them while they're there. Again, well, I think Jody is with them, not Ruby. But Ruby's entry specifically says that E and R are barefoot. Does not make any reference to J being barefoot, but they are all present picking up trash, whatever else, in the cemetery. It's hot in Utah, especially this time of year. So J is literally witnessing her 2 younger siblings having to walk around barefoot. And furthermore, she's around them physically. And at this point, there's no way that these kids aren't already looking emaciated, and those wounds on R already had to be forming. Like, you know, so Jay is witnessing this firsthand. Okay. July 31st or August 1st, not sure which one exactly, after making E jump into bushes in the desert for an hour, her feet, I imagine, were mangled. Apparently, God speaks to Jody, I assume. It's not specific. All the entry says for this section is, Lord, don't continue these physical interventions. So she's saying the Lord is saying this. Don't continue these physical interventions. They will only bring resentment. E is angry about her feet. Dress her wounds and leave her to me. It's like for the first time in this entire thing that God is like telling them to not hurt these kids anymore. It's just weird. Ruby will go on to explain that they're dressing E's wounds, soaking them in peroxide, which is horrible. But Jay is present. Ruby states, the spirit was strong as Jay, which is actually not redacted here in the police release doc, which I thought was kind of an oopsies. And I witnessed Jody cleaning what did not deserve to be cleaned. And then it seems somewhere around this time, Jay and Jody go back to Arizona together and stay down there for quite some time. It seems like almost like a week based off of the journal entries. On August 27th, though, Ruby writes, A visited the home in Ivins because she ends up having to take A back to Springville is what she ends up writing. So A visited the home in Ivins on the 20th. Ruby says that she takes A back to Springville on Friday the 25th. J, A, Ruby, and Pam apparently pack up 20 boxes in Springville and take it to a storage shed in Springville all together. And A puts in her 2 weeks at her job. Then Ruby ends up writing and adding in this section that R spent the 22nd through the 25th pooping and peeing himself, and E swept the garage and mopped it and did a good job. So in my mind, there is no way that A didn't see her siblings 3 days prior to the arrest. 3 days. We know the magnitude of R's wounds. 3 days. There's no way that A did not see her siblings, in my opinion, and did not have reason to be concerned about the way that they looked. Now, if I'm talking about Pam, why did I outline all this about J and A? Well, for me, on top of Ruby leaving her kids in Springville often, and probably for periods of time that were definitely considered neglectful, considering Pam was around these girls at least a handful of times, even if A and J didn't understand necessarily the wrong and right in the situation. Again, it's Mormons have a lot of blinders, and if you're putting this into the context of that religion and that they're trying to save these children from possession and all this other shit, then they may not cognitively understand just how wrong this is outside of their little bubble. So even if that was the case, to me, that's even more of a reason why they wouldn't necessarily know not to say something that may come off questionable to one of the only other adults that's like apparently dominantly in their lives besides Ruby and Jody, right? I mean, it's a 30-minute car ride minimum from American Fork to Springville. She's going to pick up at A in Springville, drive her to American Fork, and then have to drive her back to Springville. That's an hour worth of car ride. There's no way you're not having any conversation in my mind. The fact that these two girls were witnessing this and they're around the only other adult outside of the home, presumably with Pam, there's got to be something that like would have come up that most people would have been like, wait, what? Can you explain more? What do you mean? That's not right. And then it would have been on Pam to call, report some type of concern. For me, Pam was way too close to all of this. And I believe that's also why she lawyered up. She really didn't, the Brian Schnee and the detective that went over Pam's culpability evidentially in the case as it pertains to this particular case as well, after that initial, I think, interaction that they had on the body cam footage the day of the arrest, it sounds to me like Pam had maybe a little bit of a conversation after that, but then she lawyered up, which, if you're not arrested, like, I mean, Jody and Ruby, yeah, that makes sense. Lawyer up. You guys are screwed. But if Pam really had no idea and really wasn't that involved as she made herself out to be, then why the need to lawyer up? Why wouldn't you want to provide any help that you could when you're the only other adult that was really around these children? Why wouldn't you want to provide the help? But instead you lawyer up. That just shows to me that she knew, and she knows that she knew enough that could potentially put her in a bad spot, and she didn't report it. She didn't reach out. I mean, Ruby's coming to Springville to move boxes with them. She knew that they were moving. She had to have known. Why else would you move the boxes? And Jody's packing up her house as well. And you know that Kevin hasn't been around for the past year at least, because Jody, Ruby, and Pam went on that vacation back in July of 2022 together. And that's when they came back from that vacation is when Ruby implemented the full separation and asked Kevin to leave the house. And they've spent time somewhere in there together since then, I believe. And she didn't think that it was concerning that Ruby was doing all of this, planning to take the kids and move them to a whole nother state, sell the family home, all of this without Kevin being around whatsoever and possibly not even knowing. And furthermore, I remember Jesse at some point in one of their many, many interviews that they've done mentioning that Pam was present during their stint under Jody's control and watch back when they were being abused 14, 15 years ago. I tried to find that specific interview. I think it's the Hulu one where Jesse mentions it. But if you've got friendship dating that far back and potentially witnessing the same type of tactics, behavior, and methods being applied to a 16-year-old back then, 15 years later, you're applying it to younger children, and there's no question about these children not being around, and why is Pam always having to take care of A and J? Where's R and E? You know, raising no questions. There's no apparent red flags for this woman through all of this. It just stinks to frickin' high heaven. I can't see it any other way, and it's really, really, really unfortunate to me that at this point there's probably not going to be any legal culpability, and essentially like the name's getting cleared in a way because of Ruby's statement and the fact that there's no like evidence and that's not been put out there. I don't know if there's any way to attach anything else outside of this case, if there's another case that they can even open based off of everything that happened with connections, just because of the statutes of limitations on a lot of things, despite there being like several other victims coming forward on Jodi. I don't know, but this is why I think that Pam Bodtcher was definitely knowledgeable at the very minimum, and a passive observer, as Jesse has put. She did not do anything to help these kids. And if these kids had wound up in Arizona in the condition that they were, and considering the plans that were listed in that journal for these kids out there in Arizona, I don't think that they would have survived. And had that happened, I would put the blame on all three of these women to a certain degree. All three of them should be held accountable. But that's just my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you for tuning in. Again, I'm coming out with a couple other videos here ASAP. Just give me a little bit of time.
Okay? Her parents were in the situation of a child abuse allegation.
Okay.
DCFS made the report and went to the house and found children malnourished and locked in a safe. Okay?
In a safe?
In a safe. Okay? So now those officers and DCFS have to take custody of those children, and we're looking for this one. The rec center, when they went to go find her, said that you picked her up.
Yeah,
So
I did.
now they are trying to figure out
Why I picked her
why
up?
you picked her up, what you know with her, is she okay, did she come here willingly, all that kind of stuff.
Okay. Yeah, they
so
can
as
ask
soon
her
as they
that.
come here,
Yeah.
we'll be on our way.
Okay.
Okay, that's why I said you're just detained. You're not placed under arrest just right now until they figure out what's going on with their part. Okay?
Okay.
So as long as she's not tied up and bound because you
I did make her scrub.
do something, you
I
know?
did make her scrub the floor, and they vacuumed and stuff because I have company coming tonight from Costa Rica.
Okay.
So, but she did it of her own free will. We had lunch.
Yeah.
We went to Rolly's farm and had ice cream.
Okay.
So